Hi, I'm Verily Skeps, but you can call me Skeps, and today I'm going to show you how to make this scrolling background for free using Canva and Davinci Resolve. Please note, this is my first time doing this, and I'm sure that there are alternatives or faster ways on making this type of background, such as Adobe After Effects or Photoshop. I don't have either of those programs, so this is just what worked for me. Alternatively, you could use GIMP instead of Canva, and I'll explain when it's interchangeable, but unfortunately, I did not use GIMP for this project, so I don't have any footage on how to create these icons on GIMP. If you can do that part on your own, I can kind of walk you through the rest. Let's get started. We're going to go ahead and make a 1920 by 1080 canvas. I just clicked presentation format since it's there, but it's the same thing. Once you're here, you're going to click the background, and it's going to give you a few options that we can use if you're interested. If you look at the color option, it only gives us solid colors, but I'm more interested in a gradient background for this design, so I'm going to go ahead and click design and search up ombre. I know that term is used for hair, but I spaced out and couldn't remember the word gradient at the time, so don't bully me in the comments, I'm sorry. I'm doing this design for someone who wanted a pink background, so I wanted to find something similar to what I had in mind. I came across this one, but if you're not able to find exactly what you're looking for, there is another way to get a gradient color. Double click the color tab until this menu pops up. At the bottom, there are a few gradient choices to choose from, but if it's still not what you're looking for, you can go click the document gradient at the top and change the colors in the gradient. There are also different gradients that you can use if you do want something different. Coming back to this one, I'm going to go ahead and delete all the items on this project since I don't really need any of them. They wanted planets in their background, so we're going to try to find a planet that's either completely white or a planet that lets us change the color of it to white. You're free to keep it as is or change it to the color to whatever you'd like, but what we're going for, we're going to make it white. So this is where GIMP does come in if you do not have access to Canva Pro. A lot of the elements here are locked behind a paywall, so it does make it harder to find a free one that allows you to change the color. And later, we do need to save the image with a transparent background, and that's only allowed for Pro members. I'd recommend using GIMP to make the icon you want and kind of following the process we do from there. You can also try finding a free transparent icon through Google, transferring it to GIMP, and editing it as needed. I found a few I liked and made sure that the ones I picked have this icon pop up so I can change the color as needed. Once I've chosen the ones I've liked, I go ahead and make them all white so I can see what their silhouettes look like. When picking an icon, keep in mind to not pick one that's too thick or too busy since we are using it as a background icon and it's not supposed to draw in a ton of attention. Once you've picked an icon you like, we're going to go ahead and make the icon very tiny and start spacing out how far apart they're going to be. Don't make them huge or too spaced out. We're going to zoom into them later, and if they're too far apart, it creates this empty void. Thankfully, once you start figuring out the distance you want between each one and start copying it, Canva starts doing all the work for you by copying it and placing them in the exact distance you picked. Even though the one at the end is cut off, make sure you still copy and paste it there. It'll help for later. I went ahead and highlighted them all so we can make sure it was centered and get started on the second row. For this part, I normally place the elements between the ones in the first row and move it down so it's centered between the two. Unfortunately, since the planet is sideways, it did create the illusion, at least to me, that it wasn't centered. So I just played around with it until I got it where I wanted. I then had to do the same thing for the second element and just copied it down the row, making sure it still looked exactly how I wanted it to. From here, you can just highlight each row and copy it over to make sure that it's exactly the same distance from each other. I used the arrow keys to keep checking and make sure that they were the exact same distance because I did not want to deal with that headache later if it turned out to be crooked. Depending on what element or icon you use, you may have to change how big or far apart they are from each other. For example, on this project, I started by keeping them closer, like how I did with mine and with the planets, but it began looking a little too busy. So I began spacing them out further from each other, and that looked much better for these types of spirals. Canva didn't seem to like them being further away, so I had to copy them manually. I had to make sure that the spirals were aligned perfectly for the second row so that I can go ahead and copy that for the other rows. Like I mentioned earlier, Canva didn't seem to like them being further apart from each other, so I did have to create the first icon for each row to make sure I knew exactly how far apart they were vertically. The rest of it was exactly the same, but I wanted to show you guys that you don't have to follow this to the letter and can play with it as needed depending on what you use. Now that the page is completely filled and I'm happy with the distances, I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of the icons and lower the transparency to 50%. Feel free to lower the transparency more if you'd like. I did go ahead and lower it down in DaVinci anyways, so you do have that option there. Then we're going to go ahead and group them together so we can move them all at the same time. This part isn't a necessity, but it is a good way to see if you're happy with how far apart everything is and if you want to change anything before we move it over to DaVinci. To test and make sure that we're happy with it, we're going to enlarge the group and turn them so that they're more at an angle. You want to zoom in so that the edges of the group are kind of touching the edges of the canvas, and there's this extra slack at the end. At this point, you're probably thinking, why didn't we just make them diagonal to begin with? One, I tried that and Canva didn't help me to make sure that they were equal distances apart, and it was really hard to eyeball it. Second, we need it like this for when we move it to DaVinci because it creates that moving illusion, which I say in air quotes, but I guess it's technically moving, but you get what I mean. If you're unsure if you like it, you can go to Animate and click Drift to give you a rough idea on what it'll look like. You can also move it diagonally like this to see an accurate finish. Once you're happy with the distances of the elements and everything, we can go ahead and right-click the image, which will bring up this menu, and you're going to download with a transparent background. Once that's saved, you can delete the group so that we can go ahead and save the gradient by itself. Make sure you undo the deletion so you can keep it in Canva and edit the group if you need to in the future. This is the easy part. We're almost done, I promise. In DaVinci, you're going to go ahead and upload the gradient background you want to use and the transparent icon images. We're going to send it to the timeline and set it for 30 seconds. If it's longer than this, it's going to probably move really slowly. To make it easier to move, you're just going to go ahead and click the transform button. It should be highlighted like this. Now we just need to adjust it so we still have that extra slack that I mentioned earlier, and the empty space where the elements end isn't showing. We're also going to go ahead and lower the opacity of the image so it isn't so bright and kind of fades into the brighter part of the gradient. Again, this is completely up to you. Once the position is decided, we're going to move the marker to the beginning of the timeline and click these keyframes to lock the position. You can do it for the one position keyframe, but I did it for all of them because I wanted to make sure that everything is locked. We're going to go to the end of the video and click the left arrow button so we're at the frame right before the ending. Make sure you also lock the keyframe at this positioning of the video. Essentially what this is going to be doing is telling the program where you want the image to be at the beginning of the video and where you want it to be at the end of the video to give it that diagonal movement. Once you've locked the keyframe, we're going to grab the video and move it diagonally. This line will pop up to show you the direction of where the image is going to move. Just try your best to keep it as diagonal as possible or any direction that you want it to go. Once you've done that, you can go to the beginning of the timeline to see how it looks, and you're done. You can adjust the speed, making the length either longer or shorter, but I'm personally happy with the speed. This is the full project with that logo that I also made on Canva, and I think it came out super cute. I was struggling to find a way to make a scrolling background that didn't involve Adobe After Effects or Photoshop, so I hope this helped you and gave you the results you wanted. This is my first tutorial unlike anything, I think, so I hope it was easy to follow, but I know it was a lot of back and forth. If you have any questions, got confused on any part, have an idea on how to make this whole process easier, or just suggestions on what other tutorial videos I should make sure to leave your comments down below, and I'll try my best to answer any questions or suggestions you might have. Thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!